Hello and welcome to the podcast Renew, Recreate, Recover You. My name is Julianne Williams. I am the author of the book Head Above Water, which is the account of my experience losing my husband to suicide at the age of 36 and how you can get through grief and live a life that is happy and it brings you contentment. So today we have a really special guest. I'm very excited about this. I have Edward Tyson. Ed is a personal friend, met him through my former occupation in skilled nursing, and was a fellow board member with me for almost 15 years on a very important industry board. Ed's the CEO of Percenergy Consulting, and importantly, he's the best-selling author from expert to executive. So like I mentioned, when I first met Ed, he was a process improvement and strategy executive working for a very large publicly traded healthcare company. But for over 10 years now, I think, he's been working with companies across sectors and across the globe on issues ranging from strategy to structure and helping individual leaders on their own personal journeys from expert to executive, just like his book title suggests. Ed, I'm so excited that you're here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Julianne. It's so great to be with you and have this experience with you. I really appreciate the invitation.
Wonderful. So I know you all may be thinking, what does, how do you link from expert to executive to grief recovery and recovering your life to recreate something that is new? And, through our lives, we have leadership abilities to affect people in many areas. So clearly all of us at work have the opportunity to be a leader, to be a boss, to be a teammate, and show all of our talents there. But honestly, when you're walking through grief or you're trying to help someone walk through grief, the important thing is understanding how you can lead, how you can think about steps to move forward, and to think about how you can even set some goals for yourself. So I think that there's a really interesting way to link together how we work to how we live. So with that, Ed, that's how I connect the dots.
Yeah, let me connect my thoughts on leadership with this issue. I think I can do it in two ways. One is to say, I really feel like we all know leadership. When we embrace objectives we cannot achieve alone. It strikes me that getting through and getting our families through grief is one such objective. So first and foremost, I think we are all trying to lead our communities when we're in grief through that grief. It's seldom just affecting us. Even if we're affected somewhat differently or more impactfully, the rest of our community is in mourning for their loss of you as you go through loss or grief. So that's first and foremost one way, but I just think fundamentally it's connected. The second way is I once heard a mentor of mine approach somebody else who had lost a spouse and were leaving behind some children. And he said to that person, and I just lacked the words to provide them in the life experience. I was in my early 20s at the time. And he said to this person, how fortunate that your family has you to lead them through this. And I never forgot those words. And in fact, I've reused them with others in those times. And so for me, this idea of leadership and going through grief, whether from death and dying or any other, kind of impact, are inextricably connected.
Well, and I love that thought that you just shared, that, many times we we have that gift of leadership, and it's someone pointing it out to us that we have the ability to get through this situation. And so I really like that, because a lot of times when you're in the middle of grief, and remember that, we talk about grief by losing someone to death, but also, if we lose our job, or we have problems with a child that, makes us have that experience of loss and disappointment. Leadership is what helps you get through those situations in a much different way. But I love how you brought that home in terms of knowing that, number one, we all have the capability to be a leader, and number two, that we can encourage people even in that way when they've experienced a loss. So that's really cool.
Well, one of the things I try to do is strip away all the baggage that leadership has that I think makes us confused about it. Now, of course, my everyday focus is on leadership in the business world. And it's true, most of us think about, when we think leadership, we think either the business world or sports, and some who've had some military experiences in their life, or family members that have been in the military might even think of military leadership. But when I say pull it back, I think, what is the thing itself? What is leadership? And I really believe that it's connected to that thought I shared, that we start to understand it anytime we've, embraced a vision or an objective we cannot achieve alone. And that we're in fact leading when we attempt to cultivate the community of effort that we need to meet the challenges and opportunities before us. So I really feel like the more you get me thinking about this, and I've never, as I've been talking about my book, if I've been sharing my approach to leadership known as the Leadership SOPs, this has not been an area I've explored before. But when I really think about it, when you pull it all back and think about leadership as fundamentally just a process of social organization, you can really see a connection here with communities that are grieving and the need to form, a willing, capable, and sustainable community of effort to overcome that grief and to move on, and to make sure that people don't stay in a fragile state such that they put themselves in peril, so that now they're not only in grief, but they're in personal peril because of their inability to function productively.
Yeah, it's one thing that I, try to do is always try to find the way to link, our lives together, because in terms of our work life, our personal life, our spiritual life, we have to look at the whole person, and we're not a different, I'll say different person in any of those scenarios. And so, when we can take skills that are transferable across those parts of our life, I think it gives us the ability to, number one, you know, see ourselves in a different way. And I think healing comes from seeing yourself and recognizing your feelings, acknowledging your challenge, and trying to figure out and coming up with a plan so that you can move forward. But we can't compartmentalize. I sent something out on LinkedIn the other day, a thought that I had. And, as even as employers and supervisors, we have to recognize that people don't leave their grief at home. They come to work, and they're still grieving. Just as if, you lose, a job and you go home, you're grieving that work. So nothing is separate. And so that's why, Ed, I just love the way that these two concepts link.
Well, and I tell you, you've really stumbled upon some other thoughts that I have there around the connections here. And I was surprising what I was relearning and reobserving as I was preparing for our discussion today. And you were just hitting on it there, which is, we have inside the Leadership SOPs a model for transformation. And that model hits on many of the same themes that you just did as you were talking about the process of engaging in your grief, right? Not when the grief is happening to you and it's imparting its pain and power on you versus when you become an active participant in really overcoming and working through the grief. And the parallel there between how we suggest you guide individual transformation, i.e. coaching employees and others, also looking at assessing and developing teams and really leading broad enterprise-wide change all has this very similar theme. And the reason it occurred to me that this is because of something I teach all of the time. And it's funny how we say some things all the time, but then we fail to make the full connection. But that is that the truth is we approach change in the workplace or personal change in our lives, even when it's positive change like development, we approach that in a process that's really akin to processing grief. And so it doesn't surprise me when you were mentioning all those things that it sounds a lot like our transformation model, which is to get people from a place where they're no longer ignoring a change, resisting the change, or retreating from it, and instead are exploring it, understanding what it means, what it could mean, clarifying what they want to do, how they want to prioritize things, etc., and then really guiding others through the transformation itself. So far you've got exploring and then clarifying and then transforming, but really the last phase is what, you might use in this case a word like thriving. Now we use the word master to really develop a level of mastery with the final state. So you're not just trying to get as productive as you were before. The purpose for transformation in the workplace is always to hit higher levels of functioning. And so you want to make sure that you don't stop with the transformation until you've locked it in and really become successful. But I'm sure it's not lost on you of how that model just fits really nicely into your comments that you made just a few moments ago.
It's amazing, actually. And you kind of triggered a thought for me, which is, that transformation. And, do you grow or do you stay stagnant or do you go backwards? It is a choice you make. And having experienced just terrible grief on the loss of my husband, I have to say I would do anything to have him here with me again. However, through the process I learned so much about myself. And there are some parts of that quite frankly I wouldn't want to go backwards on, because the grief that I experienced and the life change that was so significant and the loss of all of these dreams that I had, it made me really have to sit back and figure out what I wanted my life to look like. And so it was a major transformation because I had to think about the goals that I had for myself and my two children, which were my, they're my family. And through that growth, I have seen so many changes in myself that, if I would not have had this experience, I don't know if I would have been able to find those bits of strength in myself. And so, I again, you'd never want the bad outcome, but I do think that we have to realize that no matter what, we're going to have things happen in life, and then we make a choice about it. And so yeah, that is just really neat. So
Yeah.
I don't, when we think about that, because do you have any other concepts that you want to share in terms of leading yourself or others through the grieving process, or do you think we covered that?
What I'll say for people who buy what I'm selling here in terms of thinking about the the power of a leadership lens for
Mhm.
thinking about not just your own personal grief and the fact that to get through it, you may need more than yourself to get through it. But also, many of us are experiencing it with more than ourselves, and we're trying to lead our communities, our family, those at work. If we've experienced significant grief in the workplace, we're trying to lead others, whether or not we're the formal leader or not. If you buy what I'm selling there, then much of my model actually applies. It just applies differently than I would coach it, sitting down with an executive and getting them to really think about their leadership. And here's how I think it applies. So I shared with you my core thought before around the purpose of leading, which is really to cultivate willing, because if they're not willing, then it's not leadership that you're doing, right? It's something else. It's a dictatorship. They have to be capable, because you can't just inspire your community of effort, but you also have to make them capable and strong enough to overcome the challenges they're facing. And lastly, it has to be sustainable. So your methods for helping them be willing and capable need to be sustainable. So those are the three requirements of the community you're trying to build. And really what we need to do, and this is in the workplace or ever, if you think of if a community of effort is what I'm trying to produce, then effectively I need to think thoughtfully about how I design it and how I engage it. And lastly, how I continuously improve it. And for me, I put those things together in an acronym: structure, operate, and perfect. So when I talk about the leadership SOPs, philosophy, I'm just not talking about standard operating procedures for leading. I'm also talking about what you should be aiming your standard operating procedures at. Like, what is the work of leading? And it's really to form, create, or in my words, structure the community of effort you need. So who needs to be a part of this community of effort that's getting through this grief with me or helping me to get through this grief? How am I going to engage them? How am I going to commit to myself to stay in touch and engaged with this community I'm both trying to help, or I'm also trying to have those interactions help me? Because one of the things we know as we're going through grief is we frequently close down. We stop asking for help. We stop engaging. And so how can I think about staying with that engagement? And then lastly, how can I be watching what's happening, how the group is responding, and continuously improving that community of effort, or in my terminology, perfect. So that's structure, synonym being for that, to design it. There's operate or engage it, and then there's perfect or just improve it. And so I think that mantra can really be helpful for people to think about, how can I create some intentional repetitive behaviors that help me generate this community of effort I need? Whether it's the family, how do I keep the family together? That's a community that's already defined, but we know that grief can pull us apart. So how do I keep that integrity? How do I keep the engagement? And how do I keep us moving forward in a positive direction? So I think that structure, operate, perfect, while it's really developed for the context of the business world, is so very relevant to how one might lead themselves or their family through grief.
Oh yeah, I love that, because really, what you talked about is finding out that structure, which is, how do I get help, or who do I help? And I mentioned, I did a podcast that I put out yesterday, and that was one thing I talked about. I kind of likened it to, um, you know, are you willing to pull over and ask for directions? Because some people don't want to ask for directions. They want to keep heading down a path that they think they will figure out, but they don't. And then other people stop and they just say, look, can you tell me the road that I need to turn on to get to where I need to go? And so it's sort of that reminded me of that as well. And it's just really understanding how to bring people together and to know that we all need help. So let's switch gears for just a minute. Because one thing I'm passionate about is understanding grief, like I said, in all areas of our life, and also that grief isn't just losing someone, though. Again, death and dying is something that I've focused on in my book, but really I'm talking about grieving and grief on a really much wider scale. So with the pandemic, we've seen people, just experience extraordinary grief, whether it be from losing someone that they love to losing their ability to go into the office and be social with people on a daily basis, or even having coworkers that have lost people. And so, again, since we're not compartmentalized, tell me, how do we, what types of grief we're going to see there, and then how do we help people in that environment? How do we help them through it?
Yeah, I think great question. And I think in the workplace, the most common type of grief has its source in a lack of control. And there's a lot going on, particularly in large organizations, even when we're fairly high up, that we can't control. And that produces a lot of pain and suffering, also mistrust of the people around us. And I do believe that really the building block of organizations are teams. It's not an individual, it's a team, because you don't even have an organization until you have one cellular unit, a team. Otherwise, you're just an individual up to that point. So I really feel like that fundamental building block is the natural way which humans inside of a large organization, a large population, can build defense mechanisms, coping mechanisms, camaraderie, and morale that can really build their resiliency and their ability to remain productive and focused even in difficult situations. So I think that a lot of it, of course, there's also this transformation model that I talked about before of exploring what's going on, clarifying what you're trying to get out of it and avoid from it, and then making the transformation, and then finally focusing on mastery. So explore, clarify, transform, and master. I think that's super helpful, but I think it's even more helpful in the context of a small community of effort with a high degree of trust and camaraderie. And so whether you're a member or a leader of such a team, I think that's your best source for dealing with the difficulties of organizational life and the uncertainty that comes from today's organizational life. You mentioned a bunch of the things, right? Is the next change going to hamper my career? Am I going to be downsized or outsourced? Do I have a career here? Are they listening to voices like mine? All kinds of things. How much influence do I have? They all impart a lot of stress on us. And I think the small team dynamic is the thing we have to foster most to get ourselves to a psychologically healthy and safe place upon which to then make a springboard to impact larger parts of the organization.
Yeah, it's, you talked about change a little earlier, and just everything in our world has changed through the pandemic, including how businesses are functioning, how they're performing. And so it really does affect all of us, because what was a successful business before may or may not be a successful business now. Or I've seen so many like restaurants and other things close, that it really throws people into a different phase, and again brings that feeling of loss out.
Oh, in fact, I think you're really touching on something there, Julianne, because I really believe that the great resignation is as a result of a new kind of Great Depression. I really feel as if psychologically we now have more people feeling detached and depressed across the globe than at any other given moment of time. And I think, for instance, that's one of the things that's driving home buying, car buying, housing and construction purchases, all of which then is leading to further stressing on the supply chain, which is also causing prices to rise. So I really feel like this is all like, well, you've got your finger on something that's just very interconnected. We are sharing a massive amount of grief. And this is all happening in the context of a globally more polarized political, socio-political environment than we've certainly seen in my lifetime.
Oh, I agree. It has just been a time, I think, that none of us have seen before, and who knows if we will see it again. But certainly it's been a time of, I think, reflection for many people, whatever the cause may be: loss of a job, losing family members, just being locked up for a long period of time and not having social experiences, and being able to relate to people in person. So, and that was actually part of why during COVID I started working on my book, because I realized that, in healthcare, we were already grieving, watching, so many patients and residents experience, significant illness or death. So, I just appreciate, Ed, that we were able to find this link, because I love what you say in your book. And, change, it's neither good nor bad. It is just change. It's what we attach to it. It's what we decide it is. And so I think through your process, you can decide that the change is something you can lead through, or something that, you have to approach and find that network of people to help you get through.
Well,
So
I'll just add something really quickly. As your friend, as somebody who's been lucky enough to be around you for more than a decade, you mentioned earlier about how, this tragedy in your life, you feel like in many ways has made you stronger. And I'll just tell you, all of us see that. We all experience that with you. And so if you're listening today, and you're listening because you are amidst that terrible trough of depression, where grief is impacting its power on you, I would say you are a shining example to everyone that interacts with you of how you can come through that stronger, revitalized, a massive impact on other people's lives. So if I've never told you that before, I'll tell you now that you are a very special human. And I can't thank you enough for inviting me today and welcoming me into your life.
Oh, thank you. I'm a little caught off guard. That it was a beautiful compliment. And, I've just been very lucky because I have had the network, I could not have gotten through without other people, to your point throughout the podcast, which is you really do have to ask for help and surround yourself with amazing people. Like I've been able to spend time with you and others, that are in the career. We met through work, but then really found a personal connection, and I couldn't have done it without you too. So what I want to do, Ed, is give you a couple of minutes to see if you have any kind of closing thoughts, but also I want you to be able to tell people about, the title of your book. I know you've got 2 books, and your website, because I think what you have to offer is transferable to every area of our life.
Well, thanks so much. Yeah, so my second book is not out yet, but will be soon, a couple months away, and that is Leadership SOPs Playbook. And it's a companion to my book, From Expert to Executive, Mastering the SOPs of Leading. And that's available now on Amazon. And really, the introduction takes us through my journey to developing the leadership SOPs, but the 10 chapters explore a fictional case study through the eyes of a bunch of reluctant leaders who are scientists struggling with the idea of stepping away from their craft and embracing the purpose, work, and process of leading. And so every chapter is from a different perspective and really tries to show with empathy this position of what it's like to let go of an expertise that you love. When you love the work, you love the impact of your work. Healthcare is an awesome example. We got a lot of caregivers out there who then step into leadership roles, and that's very difficult for them, is to make room in their heart for a new purpose adjacent to their craft. For an example, their nursing craft. So that's what my book is about. If you're interested in engaging with me, you can find, follow, and connect with me on LinkedIn, or you can check out my leadershipsops.com website. And certainly contact me through there, or just send me an email at ed.tyson@leadershipsops.com.
Awesome. I can't recommend your book more, whether or not, you're looking at, transforming through grief, or you're in a place in your career that you're ready to take the next step. This book will help you. I have no doubt. I think it's just an amazing. I love how you put it all together with the analogies and your characters. So again, Ed Tyson, CEO of Persynergy Consulting, his book, again, From Expert to Executive, Mastering the SOPs of Leading. Ed, can't thank you enough for spending time with me today. And, you're such a dear friend, but such a professional that I have looked up to for so many years. And it was a real privilege today spending time.
Thank you so much. And thank you all to everyone who's listening.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We will come out with our next podcast on Renew, Recreate, Recover You. I will ask if you could please like and share and subscribe on the channels that you're listening. That helps us get the message out to more people. And with that said, thank you very much.